Okay, well, thank you very much for that. This project sits at the intersection between various disciplines: archaeology, architecture, the creative industry sector, computer science, and community groups, community heritage groups, in an urban regeneration context. And the focus of what I'm talking about today is the Castlegate district, the city centre of Sheffield, Northern English city. And I'm going to talk you through what we did, and we were also one of the immersive experience AHLC projects, and highlight some of the challenges and how we went about overcoming some of those. I mean, we're increasingly used to seeing VR and AR used in heritage settings, in urban contexts, things like mobile phone apps for heritage trails, and increasingly architects and developers and local councils are starting to use VR and AR to present images of the kinds of developments that they're planning in an urban context. But these rarely involve any kind of iterative process. They're not usually used for any kind of dialogue with communities. They are just a finished model of what to expect. And we wondered whether, with our project, we could mix that up a little bit by using the expertise and the input from a variety of different disciplinary perspectives. Now, the Castlegate district, highlighted here in green in the city centre of Sheffield, is the location of the medieval castle of Sheffield. And it's been a long-running and rather sad and sorry tale of failed initiatives, failure to acquire the necessary funding. I mean, frankly, a pretty poor set of plans and ideas, actually, for development here. Now, you might be wondering, well, how could an urban regeneration project based on a medieval castle possibly go wrong? Well, if you're thinking that, you've obviously never been to Sheffield. This is the medieval castle of Sheffield. It was knocked down in the English Civil War in the middle of the 17th century. But the essence of the castle, the power of the castle, actually is writ large in the townscape, the cityscape of Sheffield. Even though people often say, oh, we didn't know we had a castle, wondered why it was called Castlegate, the street. I wondered why it was called the Castle Market that used to be on this location. And for a couple of hundred years, this has been the site of the markets of the city. The 1950s Market Hall was knocked down in 2013, and the site has looked like this ever since. What to do with it? And the council has really struggled with funding. Its ideas, grey to green, or grey to even greyer, as I like to call it, has no awareness of the heritage of the site. There's nothing about the castle built into this. Why they haven't got the funding for 6 packets of grass seed, I do not know. But there you go. Now, part of the problem is the archaeology of the castle is perceived as a problem. It's going to cost money to excavate for any development. What makes it worse is there were excavations in the 1920s and the 1950s that have never been written up, and this known unknown has been like this baggage around the ankles of the council, really stymieing any attempts to get any funding. Now, I came into this with my former colleague, John Morland, and we've been writing up these excavation reports. They've been challenging, but they've not been insurmountable. And we're writing a book. It's almost finished, honest, if my ref coordinator is here. And we've digitised the archive, and that'll be released to ADS. And that actually proved the key to unlock a problem for the council, because they managed to get regional government kickstart funding then to do some new exploratory excavations, which Wessex Archaeology did last summer, and they're writing that up, and that's going to be in our book as well. But when the immersive call came out, we were inspired to apply for it because we thought we might be able to contribute to the debate further. And we were particularly inspired by the work of the School of Architecture at Sheffield. And our students had done a project a couple of years ago with the community heritage group, Friends of Sheffield Castle, who are passionate about the history of the castle, and also sit on the steering group with the council for their regeneration plans. And they're really passionate that the castle and its heritage should be included in these plans. And so the students were given the brief of working with Friends of Sheffield Castle and local businesses to kind of come up with some storyboards of what a regeneration picture might look like. And one of the groups really got taken with the heritage of the castle, and they particularly storyboarded some ideas about the meanwhile use of the site while it's waiting for development and for the council to acquire funding. And they storyboarded all sorts of great ideas about if you could get the heritage better known, that the creative types would come, they'd start applying for funding and developing all sorts of fantastic ideas. And really, you have to remember as well, it's off the main drag of the city centre. If you don't get footfall, if you don't get people going there, if you don't get excitement about the site, nobody's going to come no matter what you build there. And it was a really exciting thing. So this is what we worked on. And we were sort of testing the capacity of particularly augmented reality to inspire design ideas, to raise the awareness of the heritage of the site, and to contribute to community and local business dialogue about how to develop the site. Now, we work with a creative industry sector organisation, Human Studio, who do a lot of work for the council, building various types of 3D models. But usually they work from existing buildings that are to be regenerated and refurbished, or they build models based around architectural plans, or they do, with this Channel 4 pitch here, they imagine buildings to generate excitement about what's possible on a site. So we wanted to test out what would happen if we gave them information from archaeological records, and they really rose to the challenge for us using the Unity gaming software. And we provided them with architectural plans, information from the excavations. We provided models from, this is an excavation, the middle picture from the 50s from Sheffield Castle. We gave them photographs of other castles nearby, and bit by bit they built up this model for us. Obviously there were all sorts of complexities about this, and they developed the model in various levels of resolution, because we were eventually going to put it into a mobile phone app, which was going to have to be much simpler. But they produced some great rendering of the castle, and we've used it in a variety of contexts, for sort of posters, and we've got a fly through which I might have time to show you later. So in terms of testing out how a creative industry sector organisation used to working from existing buildings and plans would operate, they work very, very well with us. The next thing we had to do was test how we could deliver this technology. And my computer science colleagues, led by Steve Maddock in Sheffield, developed a mobile phone app. And this was a phone app designed for Android phones. Because one of the constraints was that we were kind of confident we could use something like the Pokemon Go type technology and walk down to Castlegate, put your phone up, there's a castle. But the architect said, woohoo, hang on a minute, no. We can't just have a model plonked onto the existing buildings. You've got to have it sitting behind and in front of existing buildings in the landscape, because for any regeneration plan, who knows which of the buildings will be earmarked to be refurbished, which will be knocked down. So just kind of going there with your phone and going, there was the castle, is not good enough. So solving that occlusion problem was quite a challenge. And what the computer scientists did was to build a virtual reality model of the townscape as it now is, and use that along with the technologies of the phone itself, with its GPS technology, to be able to plot where the user was. And we also narrowed it down to a series of viewing points as well to make it more accurate. We also had the sort of problems you can imagine, that the ground level is not the same as it was in the medieval period. Hence, but this is why actually castles are great, because you can have moats and moats and nobody worries too much. I mean, our first version of the model had the castle floating above the street, but we just filled in the moat a bit and it doesn't look too unrealistic. We also developed using a sensor fusion algorithm and using the device's gyroscope and accelerometer, an ability to work out where the user was, and then they manually adjust by aligning the virtual model and the real view of the world behind it together, and then you switch on to the castle. And one of the great things about this, when you're down on the site using it, is that sense of scale of just how big the castle was, swamping the car park behind it, and various pubs as well. So it was quite a challenge for them, but they did a really good job. And the other thing that they did was to set an algorithm which was able to compute where the viewer was, but also when, what time of day, what time of year it was, so that the sunlight looked reasonably realistic as well, and it wasn't just a sort of pastiche of the castle. Now, having done all of that, what we wanted to do then was to coincide with the Wessex excavations that I mentioned earlier, which were taking place last September, and also the University of Sheffield Festival of the Mind. It's sort of academic, community, cultural festival. It takes place every other year, and wanted to sort of launch the app and get people down on site. And there was meant to be a kind of viewing area around the Castlegate site when the excavations were on to use it. But that fell through, and that presented us with a problem because we realised, given where the streets are, that there was quite a health and safety risk of lots of people turning up with their phones, having downloaded our app, wandering around the street going, me, look at that castle, boof, as we just came past. So we thought we couldn't actually do that. So we regrouped and thought of a different way of approaching it. And we reconfigured the model into a tablet format, into an iPad format, using the AR kit for iPad facility. And we had a slot in the Millennium Galleries in the city centre, alongside a whole series of other technological innovations that the university was showcasing. And what we initially had in our head was a plan that you would walk into an empty space, there's some pictures at the back about the castle, and you'd hold up your iPad and suddenly there it would be. And then the architects balked at that because they said, well, this isn't how we present models to the public. We like the physical, we like the wooden model, so you can actually go and see the townscape. So we compromised, and the architects built a wooden model at scale of the city centre with the blank bit in the middle. And then we used the iPads to enable members of the public to see the castle in augmented reality. And what was great about this, over a week, we had 8,000 visitors, huge buzz around the city about this. Not surprisingly, perhaps, it was the only part of the festival that got picked up by the regional news. So then that's 800,000 viewers that we got for this. So it actually gave the community group both a great kind of visual identity, which they'd been struggling with before. With all they got before with kind of bits of photographs from 1920s excavations. And now they've got something much more modern looking, and something that really engaged the public, from very young children who picked the iPad up and were off instantly, actually to much older users who, obviously picked the iPad up, looked at the back, wondered where the technology was, and then off they went. And it was, and it also gave rise to a huge amount of dialogue and discussion. And that's the thing perhaps we weren't expecting. We were worried about whether people would just be wandering around with the iPad on their own. We got lots and lots of really useful feedback about that. What we're also now doing is working on releasing this as a mobile phone app, but not a location-aware one, the type that we were developing, because we are still concerned about the constraints of the space down on the Castlegate site. But one that people can download to use. They can just use a flat surface as their marker, enabling them to see the castle, zoom in and out, and then you'll also be able to kind of go onto the inside of the castle and see all of the development work that we did with that as well. Overall, I think we had some other challenges as well when we were actually in the Millennium Galleries. One of the things that we wanted to do with the app eventually is to have it so that you can also, as you can see the present, you can see the past, you can also see some of the future design ideas. And obviously the only design ideas that we had were those of the students. And we did have a toggle function on the iPad so that you could have a look at some of these drawings, but we didn't have the design time to develop that into an augmented reality experience as well. There was also a little bit of concern at this point from the council, who said, well, hang on a minute, there is a risk you're going to set hairs running now as to what this is going to be. Of course, the community group were fantastic. If people, think that these design ideas are actually going to represent aspects of the castle, whether it's kind of buildings on the site that capture the architecture of the castle, which wouldn't be out of keeping with what went on in the 19th and early 20th century, because many of the photographs and paintings that we had from that time actually show many of the factories that had been on the site were built to look like parts of the medieval castle. And actually, there was a wonderful bit of research that we did that discovered in the 1870s, when the then Prince and Princess of Wales visited Sheffield, that there was such a horror at the thought that they might see the slaughterhouses on the site of the castle, that they built this great big kind of 100-metre long kind of banner at the side of the castle on canvas and wood with the painting of the castle on it, just to try and give the impression that the castle had been there. So this ongoing kind of recreation of the castle and the power of the castle is something that's come to light in multiple contexts in our research. What we're doing next, because again, development on the site is stalled, is exploring the possibility of this technology with other community groups within the city. Moving next to another part of the castle landscape, part of the deer park, and the 1950s brutalist architecture and the flats that are located above Sheffield train station, if you know them, Park Hill Flats, which are themselves now going through a big regeneration process. And we're working with the community group there who are lobbying the developers and the council about the kinds of regeneration and the kinds of facilities that they want. And so we're going to be working with them in our next phase of the work, working on both heritage and I think also perceptions of heritage. And I think finally I'd say that for the Friends of Sheffield Castle, we wanted to do something that was archaeologically accurate, but also something that was actually quite aspirational. I think it had to be something that looked really like something that they could be proud of. And that indeed was the most common feedback that we got during our installation in these Millennium Galleries. Wow, we didn't know Sheffield had a castle. Blow me. Thank you very much.